Coming to you from the greatest city in the world, this is the #1 showbiz podcast. It's Talk for Two. Here's your host, Matt Bailey.
Thank you so much, Gary. Let's start as usual by also thanking Axtel Expressions and the Tangent Bound Network. The Tangent Bound Network, as you know, is the reason that over 100 episodes is available on talk4two.com. And Axtel Expressions, well, if you're an entertainer and you don't know Axtel Expressions, your head's in the sand like an ostrich. And they have an ostrich puppet. So visit axtel.com for really, really cool products for entertainers. Now, before we get started, I want to talk about our servers. It's been brought to my attention that about 10 or so, a nice chunk of episodes is missing from iTunes. I'm aware of that. I'm part of groups with other podcasters. They're aware of that too. It's an iTunes IT issue, not necessarily anything that's happening with our feed. If you want all of the episodes from way back when we started over 2 years ago, just visit the website and search for the one you want. And you can even download from the site, and we'll be all good. Well, that time of year is upon us. This week, I want to talk about another gift we have for the entertainer in your family, or maybe even yourself. Ventriloquism for Comedy Clubs, the DVD I did with Pete Michaels, is available from both talk4two.com and petemichaels.com. If you want to know about the real work behind performing in comedy clubs, get this. And speaking of comedy clubs, today we have one of the funniest guys I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. Tony Deyo is a New York City-based comedian. He is a full-time working professional stand-up who has made national television appearances on Conan and The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson. Deyo shares the unique way he entered full-time comedy. I don't want to spoil it, but he was actually a school teacher before going full-time. Plus, Deyo discusses how being a clean comedian but working for adults can be a tricky niche to label. I can't really explain it. It's like the different levels of clean, and we talk about it, and words you say and words you can't say, and things that offend people that you don't think about. I can't really explain it. The conversation just has to speak for itself. So here now, our interview with Tony Deyo. Tony Deyo, welcome to Talk for Two. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing very well, Matt. How are you?
I am great. Thank you for being here. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, sure be.
All right. Now, I got to ask, how did you get started in stand-up comedy?
Well, I think I took a little bit of an indirect route. I was down in Texas. I was teaching band. My kind of first life was in music education.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that the comedy club was teaching a class when I moved to Austin, and I'd been a fan of stand-up my whole life, and I'd gotten sort of that point where I knew, if I don't go try this thing now, I probably never will.
Right.
And so I signed up for the class, and I took the class, and it got me on stage the first time, and after that, I couldn't really stop doing it.
Yeah, were you a funny teacher? Were you a funny teacher?
The odd thing about that, I was a very strict teacher.
Really?
Which, yeah. Like I would joke around with the kids, but I did kind of expect them to be very good. And I was more strict with them. Because I always thought, for me, the fun part of music was being good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured if I could make them good, then they would, not in that sort of Whiplash, the movie sort of way, if you've seen that. Not quite that strict, but, I figured if they were good, they would see what I loved about music, which was being good at it.
Yeah. Now, is being good at it, and you are very good at it, is being good at stand-up comedy now what's fun for you about comedy?
Yeah, I would agree with that very much, because those first years were not a lot of fun. But I don't know how I tricked myself into continuing on, but somehow I did.
And
I think I heard who was it? Oh gosh, what's the comedian? I'm not feel stupid that I didn't come up with his name, but I just woke up a little while ago, so you'll have to. The comedian, he did the movie. He's a long form storyteller.
Yeah, I'm blanking too.
Birbiglia. Sorry.
Oh, Mike Birbiglia. Yeah.
Yes. Birbiglia was talking about how you have to be a little bit delusional to be a young comedian. And I very much agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Because, the first time you start, you have to kind of think you're doing at least okay at it, or you won't keep going. But the truth is, you're not doing okay at it. You're really, really bad. But we all sort of convince ourselves somehow that we're doing okay.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of delusion involved in those first years, but I was not good at all for a long time.
Well, it's funny you mention that because it does take somebody who is kind of delusional to leave their teaching job and become a stand-up comic. So you must have had a fascination with it or an interest in doing it for a while prior. When did you become fascinated with that as an art?
Oh, a long time before that. Back in high school at some point, I started watching comedians.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of why I knew that at some point, if I didn't try it, I would probably look back and regret it.
Yeah.
Because it was something I had loved so long. But I grew up in a small town where people don't go off to become stand-up comedians. So there was no blueprint or no one I knew who had been in show business that goes, oh, it's just a regular job, and if you work hard at it, you can do it as well. It seemed very much, until I moved to Austin, like I didn't even know how you would start doing comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's I don't want to act like I'm that old, but now there's the internet, and you go online. You could probably Google or on YouTube, how do you become a stand-up comedian? There's probably 5,000 videos of comics telling you their little path.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't really exist when I started. So, it was kind of a leap of faith to go take this comedy class and, think that I might be able to one day do it. And I really, sort of in my mind, I kind of expected to fail at it. I was ready to fail,
mm-hmm.
but I wanted to know that I had tried.
Yeah. And this is a tough question for anybody to answer because the answer is always so personal. When did you know, okay, I can leave the security of my job as a music teacher to jump in and do it full time? I'm assuming you do it full time. I see your website and you're touring all over the place. When did you know you could make that leap?
Well, that was sort of the greatest thing about my career is I never had to make that decision. Even longer than I was band directing, I started writing marching band shows back in college. Not the music, but how they kind of move around on the football field.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of did the math in my head, and I knew if I quit teaching and I did some more of that writing work, I could make my whole living writing marching band shows in the summer, and then it would give me about 9 months to go out and be a stand-up and not have to worry about the money.
Oh, wow. Oh,
and
that's very smart.
That's what I did. I quit teaching. I took on a lot more like band show writing work. And then once September rolled around, I was done with my band show work. I just started working on comedy. And I never had to go out and take the really awful $50 one-nighters because I had to pay the electric bill.
Mm-hmm.
Which it was the only way that it was going to happen for me. I'd already lived sort of a real life. I couldn't go back to starving and living with roommates and all that stuff. I was married and I had a dog and a house and everything. It was probably the only way it was going to happen for me was in a way where I didn't have to take such a huge lifestyle cut.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I don't want to say a lifestyle cut like I'm just living large all the time.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
I still, to this day, I take the summers off and write band shows. Now, not so much certainly not because comedy doesn't pay me anymore, but it's something I've done for more of my life than I haven't at this point. And it's just a thing that I love doing, and it gives me a little bit of a break. So I still run around New York and do spots in the summer, but I don't really go on the road much.
Mm-hmm.
And it lets me take just a little bit of a mental break from comedy. Because guys can get kind of burned out, and
mm-hmm.
I get that little break every year, and then I'm really excited to get back to it again in September.
Yeah, and you've put a new question in my head, so forgive me if this is inarticulate in any way.
No, it's not at all.
Is this this passion for music and this passion for band work that you have you found that there's a certain musicality to the way you write comedy that translates from your love of music? Is there a comparison?
I do believe so, when I was a musician, I was a drummer. So my whole life was rhythm. And I feel like I have extremely good timing as a comedian. And it could be just me telling myself that, but I think I do.
I think you do too. I think you do too.
And I think that has all come over from being a musician and understanding the rhythm of the audience and the rhythm of the laughter, and knowing, as a comedian, at some point you do sort of think about, when do I start this next joke? At what point, with the laughter kind of dying from the last joke, do I start talking again? And that's all rhythm based. And I think I'm pretty good at making those decisions, at least for me in my style of comedy. Someone would argue and say, you pause too long, or you're a little too slow. But at least the decisions I'm making, I'm very good at calculating when I think I'm supposed to do all those things.
Well, and if anybody complains about those things about being slow, and if you want, it's a unique delivery. I like it. I like slower paced. I think sometimes rapid fire, you can kill your audience. You can kill the laughter because they're laughing so much they burn themselves out.
Exactly. And I always it might be me being too egotistical about myself, but
no,
I always
not at all.
feel like my word choices are very specific, and I feel like people kind of have to be paying attention and with me and thinking, and if I really just fire through everything, a lot would get lost, I think. But, who knows?
Yeah, it's so interesting, and this brings me to my analysis of your comedy, if I may, and it is just one simple sentence. You're clean. I mean, the way that you talk about certain adult topics, like one of my favorites is the breast milk ice cream.
Yeah.
That's about as sort of, for lack of a better term, risque or as blue as you get. And I love to see articulate, clean comedy, or especially comedy that talks about adult material in ways that it doesn't sort of go blue. Is that an intentional decision on your part? To stay clean?
Kind of. It's interesting that you ask that, because within the last year or so, I stopped calling myself a clean comedian.
Really?
Yeah. And the way it came about, I used to, it was on my bio and everything, but it happened in a couple ways. Number one, there's no arguing whether someone's dirty or not. When they're a dirty comedian, we sort of all agree on it. And I literally have no problem with dirty comedians. Some of those guys make me laugh harder than anything.
Yeah.
But when you say you're clean, there's a lot of different levels of clean. Like, I'm comedy club clean. I'm about as clean as any comedian working in a comedy club today. But then there's another level of clean where if you talk about having a beer, they consider you not a clean comedian anymore. And I didn't want people to come to a show expecting something like a show you would be able to do in church and then being disappointed because I said the word condom at some point.
Right.
I didn't want people disappointed with that. And the other thing that really pushed me over the edge is I did a comedy festival up in Michigan, and I got booked on the Clean Showcase, and we did 6 shows that weekend, and they were okay. They brought in a lot of people, so I know they weren't all comedy fans. And I know, a lot of the audience heard the advertising or saw the promo and said, oh, it's clean. We've never done this before. Let's go see this guy. So the shows were okay. And a friend of mine booked a show at this festival called The Dirty Show. And it was at midnight. He's a buddy of mine. He knows exactly what I do, but he said, do you want to be on The Dirty Show? I said, yeah, I'd love to. So I went to The Dirty Show. I didn't change a single thing. I didn't say any swear words or anything. I just did exactly the same act, and it was the best show of the entire week.
Wow.
And I started thinking about it as it really is like an audience member that goes to a clean comedy show because it's going to be clean and they're not worried about you saying shit. That's not a great comedy club audience member. They're not there because they love comedy. They're there because they love you not saying shit.
Yeah.
So literally, I went home from that festival. I rewrote my bio. I took out any reference to it being clean. And I'm completely okay with other people saying that I'm clean, but I have I will no longer say it about myself.
Well, it's interesting because you're right about the levels of clean. You're a clean that acknowledges that you are an adult.
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
you're a level of clean for adults that don't want to come and hear the F word every 5 seconds, but isn't going to get offended if you talk about ice cream being made from breast milk. It's
exactly. I wish there was a sort of easier way to make that designation, because I'm the perfect comedian for a lot of people, but you can't put all that in a bio or on a promo poster or something.
Right. It's a really tough middle ground to hit in marketing.
Yeah. So what I'm kind of, the plan now is just to be funny, and people, will eventually hear about me in the manner they hear about me. And other people will say I'm clean. And at least in that sense, if someone comes out and then I talk about having a drink and they get upset, well, I wasn't the one that said I was clean. You read the newspaper article.
Yeah.
So go talk to that guy and be upset at him.
Yeah. Do you? You said that some of the foul-mouthed blue comics are some of the guys that make you laugh the hardest. But do you find that kind of material is easier to do than to be even clean for an adult?
No. I think it's easier sort of when you're young to get laughs if you're a little dirtier, because there are, they're kind of trigger words, and even still as a society, as much as you hear them, we still pretend to be a little bit shocked by them in a show or something. But to get to a particular level of comedy where you're very successful and very good, dirty or clean, it takes the exact same amount of effort. It's just a different way of writing. And I'm just as impressed with, a guy like Big J. Okerson.
Right.
Makes me just howl laughing. I think he's fantastic. But I love Brian Regan just as much. They're both just extremely successful, very, very funny guys, and they go about it in a different manner.
Yeah, I met Brian after his special at Radio City. I went to the taping, and I actually waited around because I wanted to meet him. And I got to ask him. I said, "Is it what's with the decision to stay clean?" And he goes, "It's not a mission statement." I'll never forget it. He goes, "It's not a mission statement. It's just life and his observations and his viewpoint. He just doesn't see it through the lens of a Big J type of person." So,
and he's I'm sort of taking my cue from Brian, and Brian's even a different level of clean than I am, because Brian won't talk about some of those things that I do, but he also will not call himself a clean comedian. He lets other people do that.
Yeah. You let the press kind of happen for you. It's that's a very interesting way of doing it, and a very cool way of doing it, because you let your fan base kind of define you. It's really.
And he's talked about to himself, and I agree with him. He would rather just be known as a very funny comedian, and people come up and force them to realize after the show that he wasn't dirty. Not. And the same reason I do. I don't want people going just because they think I'm not going to say a bad word.
Yeah. It's just really cool to see, like you said, with the different levels. Now, I want to switch gears. What brought you to New York?
It was actually my wife's idea. And we were living in North Carolina at the time, and we'd been there a little while, and we didn't really, we had acquaintances, but we didn't have a lot of friends. My friends were sort of comedians and artists and musicians, and most of my friends lived in New York, except, a few kind of in the Washington, D.C. area, because I grew up in Virginia and went to college in Virginia. So we knew some people sort of there, but we knew a lot of people in New York. And a comedian had told me when I was younger that your three choices as a comedian were to live in New York, in L.A., or to live in obscurity. That was always kind of in the back of my head. And so it was actually, my wife's idea. She's like, why don't, timing is right. Why don't we go live in New York for a little while? And it's been probably the best career decision that I've made.
How many years have you been here?
be 8 years in 8 years this month, actually. We're coming right up on the anniversary.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. And you're all the way out in you're all the way out in Queens, and I'm all the way in Lower Manhattan. So that's why, just to tell our listeners, that's why we didn't meet up for this. Because my whole day, both of our days would just be shot. If we did that.
Yeah, it ruins today.
But how has it helped your career? You were saying it's been one of the best decisions.
It's being around a community of other people that do the same thing you do. This community of comedians exists here in LA, a little bit in Chicago, and nowhere else in the country.
Yeah.
I lived in North Carolina. I knew probably two real comedians that lived within an hour of me. Mm-hmm. And now I can throw a rock and probably hit 6 comedians' apartments.
Yeah.
Without leaving my front door.
Oh, that's great.
So you get to be around people that do what you do, and just work opportunities and things, and the networking, and it's been great to be here.
Mm-hmm. Now you brought that up, and I love the sense of community among professional working comedians, and I'm gonna, forgive me here, but I have to tell you a story that goes with this next question. I'm a magician. I don't know if you gleaned that from when we met, telling our listeners that we actually met at YouTube Space. We were there to learn how to be better video bloggers. So it's interesting the people you meet and when you meet them and where you meet them. But I'm a magician and a ventriloquist. And we get to book ourselves at the corporate event or at the family event or at the Cub Scout event, and you work your whole year doing that specific market and just being the guy in that market for whatever you're doing, whether it's event.
Yep.
But I was advised to go do some open mics.
That's a good idea, actually.
Talk about the most vile, places. Talk about the most vile thing. I mean, I was scared for my life, not because of anything that the comedians were doing. I knew that I wasn't going to get laughs because it was a room of comedians, but a race war literally broke out. These two guys got into an argument over a joke somebody had made, and I don't know if they were liquefied or not, but I'm sitting there thinking, I don't need this. I can work hard at booking my show at a campground because I have a novelty, but comedians, and this isn't to disparage at all, I love and respect it, there's a mentality among comedians that you have to fight your way up. And it's interesting that you never did that either. You stabilized yourself in terms of financially, is what I'm talking about with fighting. Mm-hmm. And then you just started working. Why is it that way for stand-ups? Why is it that way? Why can't you just go and book yourself at an event?
Well, because it takes you, at least for me, and I think people wouldn't disagree with me too much, it was probably 7 or 8 years before I was even competent, really, to stand on the stage and tell jokes for, say, a half hour. Mm-hmm. It takes you a long time to learn your voice, and unfortunately, that's the open mics are the route we kind of have to go to do it. Yeah. Because we can't go, you can practice magic in your bedroom and be pretty good at it when you go out to a job. Right. You could get very good without anyone ever seeing you do it. Mm-hmm. But it's impossible to become a good comedian without getting up in front of an audience. And, in the beginning, it's an audience that's willing to listen to you be bad. So you can imagine the quality of that audience. Yeah. Now, you're going to get good open mic audiences. They're not all that bad. But there most definitely are ones that are that bad, and you have to, you get through it, and then you sit down and you hope you learn something from it. And even if it's, learning to be bad in a different way. Yeah. you hope you walk away with a lesson of some sort.
Yeah, bad in a more productive way.
Yeah. Now, you get to a point there's a point in your career where you don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to go do bad open mics because I work on the road a lot, and when I'm in the city, I kind of get to do better shows. Mm-hmm. But the early part of my career was doing some really bad shows.
Mm-hmm. Where's the breakthrough point? Where does it cut? I would assume it's like anything else, you kind of bust through.
Yeah. For me, it was around that 8-year point, I started getting good and getting a decent amount of work on the road. And then I'd say it was almost 11 years, but a little over 10 years when I got booked on Conan, and that was a huge turning point in my career.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. What's that like? Is that tougher doing it with the TV in front of you, with the the camera?
It's tougher in that when you walk out there for the first time, it's the first time you've ever been in that situation in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to handle the pressure of what's going on and still be able to do that thing you do competently enough, in front of that audience and in front of an audience of 1 million.
Mm-hmm.
So you're really sort of digging deep for a lot of skills you learned over the years.
Yeah. And then you did HBO a little bit after that, or was that before that? I was reading.
The HBO thing that's probably in my credits somewhere was just the comedy festival.
Oh, cool.
But 5 months after I did Conan, I did The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
And that was better in that I had been on television before, but it was its own pressure because I only had 2 days' notice.
Mm.
So, that was kind of a pressure cooker that I never thought I'd be in, because I didn't submit. I submitted for Conan. I did not submit for Ferguson. They just called me out of the blue one day and asked me, can I be in LA in 2 days and tape? So
yeah.
I had, that great thing about living in New York City, there's a bunch of shows going on. I was able to run around New York that night, putting together a set.
Mm-hmm.
And then I flew to LA on Wednesday and ran it one more time that night, and then taped it on Thursday.
Wow.
So that was kind of an insane pressure cooker. And there was a winter storm going on at the time too, so I almost didn't make it to LA. So the funny thing is, if you watch those TV spots side by side, you can see the nerves in my eyes probably for the first 30 seconds or so of the Conan set, because number one, I didn't even know if I was going to get laughs. So once I got laughs, I settled in. But the Ferguson set, you can see I'm just a lot more natural, and I walk out and I'm already just, I'm literally happy to be there, because I almost wasn't.
Yeah. Wow. It's great. It's kind of it's wild when that stuff happens and you just go for it. But I think it makes sometimes those shotgun types of things make for the best moments, because the spontaneity plays a bit of a role.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So this is great. And Conan, what did it teach you about performing comedy, not just on television, but live, and having to contend with all those different elements?
Well, the easy part is they're one of the greatest audiences you'll ever be in front of. They're there to see comedy, and they're excited. They're watching a television show. So even though you do worry about it, you almost don't have to worry about them laughing at your jokes. They're short of something really weird going on, they're there to have a very good time. So you just have to be able to deliver it the way you want to deliver it, that's really where you're, kind of digging deep for those skills. Is if you're too much in your head and you get too nervous, you're not going to portray yourself the way you want to. And you look back on it and go, I could see I was very nervous. And that's okay, honestly. Everyone's sort of first time on television, it's not going to be as great as their fifth time.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot more energy there. It is, there's a lot of things going on in your head. I always say, I wish I had one picture of me the moment I'm standing behind the curtain and Conan starts reading my intro.
Oh, great.
Because that moment in your life, it's a train that you can't stop anymore. And you've never done this thing, and in 3 seconds they're going to open the curtain, they're going to walk out. And it's really, there's just almost no words to describe what's going on in your mind at that moment.
I can imagine the void of understanding of what it is. Ooh, nerves on top of nerves, on top of excitement, on top of just everything else. That's so cool, though. It's really cool because, again, telling our listeners of how we met at YouTube, that popped up on the video that they pulled up. We had to submit videos for this workshop, and we kind of like an in-the-moment thing, upload it and send it in. And yours was one of the ones we watched on the big screen, and then your Conan thing's right there in the corner, and everybody was like, "What? What's this?" So that was cool to see. But I want to close this out with our final question. What do you want to see in comedy from the generation that's just learning the craft and coming up? What do you want to see from future comedians?
It's an interesting question. It's good. I hope that the younger generation still kind of pays attention to jokes, you know, because there's, and I don't know how successful you can be at it or what level you can reach, but just going out in New York, you see a lot of kind of rambling, no direction type of comedy. And, you know, that is kind of, you know, maybe an alt-room style or whatever, but, you know, if you want to be a comedian, if you want to go out and you want to, you know, perform and do stand-up comedy, you still have to learn how to write a joke, even if you tell it and the way you deliver it is differently. There's still kind of some rules about jokes, and I hope that doesn't get lost in the transition.
I hope so too. And well, you are a master at exactly that. Mr. Tony Deyo, thank you so much for being with us. This was wonderful.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tony. Hopefully we'll bump into each other again real soon. Until then, continued success, my friend. And that's it for us this week. In the meantime, head over to talk4spellout2.com for even more Talk for Two. Check out some of the awesome stuff we have for you in the Talk Shop. We talked at the beginning about the Ventriloquism for Comedy Clubs DVD. And get our T-shirt, our very first official podcast T-shirt. We're taking orders. Get it in time for the holidays. Show your Talk for Two pride, okay? Reach out by emailing talkfor2cast, FORTWOCAST, at gmail.com, and find our group or like us on Facebook by searching for Talk for Two. Tweet us and about us using @ and hashtag Talk42. Website is the only one with the numeral, and there's a contact form on there. In fact, it's funny, many of you just use the contact form, so maybe the email is obsolete. I don't know. Maybe you should just text me. I don't know. It's really weird. It's weird. I'll schedule interviews over email, and then people will text me. It's the funniest thing. Anyway, that's a tangent, but that's okay because we're on the Tangent Bound Network. Speaking of, thank you once again to our season sponsors, the Tangent Bound Network and Axtel Expressions, our entertainment sponsor. We talked about both of them at the top of the show, and I hope you'll go check out their sites. Signing off for Talk for Two, I'm Matt Bailey, reminding everyone out there to keep talking for two.
You can hear more show business interviews with the stars at talkfor2.com, where you'll also find one-of-a-kind products to improve your own show. That's talk, the number 4, TWO.com.